We're here with Chris Alexander, the new editor on Fangoria. Thank you for giving us this time.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
And so I guess what first got you interested in the horror genre, specific movies or books?
Yeah, it was, again, I can always say, I repeat this a lot, but every time I repeat it, I remember something new. It was like, oh yeah, that. But the big thing was, honestly, was Kiss, was the thing that kind of ushered me into horror, because I was 3 and I was at the library and we used to take records out. My dad would always bring me in books, and there was a copy of their 77 album, Love Gun. I don't know if you know that album, but it's like an airbrush shot of the 4-band, like very comic book, very kind of bizarre, with these emaciated vampire women swooning at their feet with all this fog coming around. And it was just so, I think it was erotica before I even knew what erotica was, but it had this kind of Beauty and the Beast aesthetic, and it was Gene Simmons, and he had the fangs on that picture, and I didn't know what I was looking at. And I knew that it was something dangerous and something very, very strange, and I would have nightmares every night about Gene Simmons coming like a ghost through my ceiling vent to come and get me and shit. So because this was haunting me, I became obsessed with it. Eventually, I got the record out and realized it was just shitty rock and roll. Now, I'm still a huge Kiss fan. It's my favorite band of all time because I'm so tied to it nostalgically. But that was the kind of thing that kind of made me aware of the fantastic. And my dad was always into a lot of science fiction and progressive rock music. So, you know, I'd be listening to Procol Harum and Pink Floyd and a lot of these, more avant-garde and abstract kind of music with headphones on when I was just like 3 or 4. So I was my mind was bending and warping and was open to new stimulus. I went to the House of Frankenstein and Clifton Hill in Niagara Falls, and I was dragged through a haunted house when I was 4, and it just completely annihilated me. And I had the flag of Frankenstein on my bulletin board, and I had to turn it upside down when I went to bed. And so I just, all these different obsessions. Invasion of the Body Snatchers '78 came on TV one night. I was being babysat and I was not allowed to watch it, but I had a Batman comic with the one sheet, so I knew about the movie and I wanted to see it because it was just looked so fucking weird. So my babysitter fell asleep and I turned on the TV just in time to see Donald Sutherland take an axe to his own double. I'm like, oh! And I turned it off and I was fucked. Like that was the primal scream right there. So bookended between Kiss and Invasion of the Body Snatchers were what really kind of sputtered me on to wanting to see the next thing and really get in there. And I think by the time I was 10, anyways, I was that guy. I was the guy that drew all the monsters, that had the briefcase full of comic books and Fangorias, and could give you obscure information about every kind of horror film. Was having sleepovers where I'd program these movie nights where we'd actually, back in the day, had to rent a VCR and then rent the movies on top of it, and had my own little fanzine when I was 12 and everything else. So it was a long trajectory to get to there. But monsters have always been, and horror, and I think when I realized I was going to die too, that was a big thing where I was like, oh my God. And then I'd watch horror movies on a sort of intellectual level, to explore those anxieties. So it's always been with me since I have a memory. It literally is probably my life's work. I'm dedicated to this shit.
Which raises the next question, which is, you spoke about your zine when you were a kid, but what ultimately led you to do journalism and specifically go to like Fangoria ultimately?
Well, I mean, you know what it is that I think if you love something so much, I don't care what it is, if it's a sport or whatever, then you hold on to that with a death grip. And even though people tell you to give it up and do this, and don't. Just don't do it. I don't care what it is, unless it's like mass murder or child molestation, give that up. But if it's something like this, don't give it up, and I never did. And I think because I love this stuff so much, and with horror movies, it gets a bad rap. And I always wanted to scream to the high heavens and justify this stuff, and I wanted to communicate why I love this stuff to people. And I wanted them to understand me, because this was such a big part of me. And there was also this great shock factor too, where it's like dangling the spiders in front of the girls, right? It's like, I'd be on the bus with the Gore Zone magazine and showing the most disgusting pictures, and the chicks would freak out, but they were so hypnotized by it. And so I had the kind of aura of, I'm totally aggrandizing myself, of like danger. I was a geek, okay, But anyways, so the communication, the part that led to journalism was I went to film school, dropped out of film school because I don't believe that you can put any boundaries on art and someone telling you what art is, and then you go to the next class and he tells you something different. It's like, fuck off. So I left that, started doing music. Any way I could communicate the way I felt about these darker, abstract films and medias. And then journalism was just basically the first thing I did that was the easiest and the cheapest, was to actually just put a pen to a piece of paper and scribble it, and I could communicate that in an effective way. So I began reading a lot of, I was always reading, so that pulpy comic book style. Fangoria, there was a writer named Chaz Ballin, who in many ways was like a Hunter S. Thompson of horror, this gonzo writer. Always amazing turns of phrase. I kind of cribbed my whole beat from him, because reading his stuff was like an adventure. He would take you by your hand and just in 3 pages by the end of it, you got a cinema history lesson in a very, very brief way. You were completely entertained. It was written like rock and roll, so it was unpretentious and it was alive. It was alive. So, long story short, became a publicist at Warner Brothers. Blah blah blah. Used that to exploit all the press contacts I was getting, and then wrote under a few different names, doing reviews. And then Rue Morgue was this little magazine run by Rod Godin. It was a free thing in Toronto. And I picked it up at a store once, and it was Tombs of the Blind Dead article, and I thought I knew about Tombs of the Blind Dead. And I almost literally walked into a car because I'm like, holy blind. So then I called Rod up, and then this association, and I wrote for them for 5 years. But then, you keep wanting more and more and more, and you should want more and more and more. You don't ever settle. And I wanted Fango. I wanted to be part of that because it was my history, So eventually ingratiated myself into their camp. And it was the right decision to make, obviously. 2 years later, things were changing in the lineup there, and I got the call out of the blue, too. I don't even really know. I'm like, what? Me? Yeah, okay, because the guy there liked my work. Good. So it just happened, part of it, just luck. The other part is, David Cronenberg always said this, and I read this in a book about Cronenberg when I was a kid, and the quote was very simple. It said, if you stick around long enough, people will remember you. And I really believe that, And so, and another guy said too, is like, until somebody takes your business card in front of your face and rips it up, never stop knocking on their door. So that's what I always did. It's like,
it's good to know,
come on, man. Like what you guys are doing here, I mean, it's work. You're probably not getting paid for it, but you're doing it for love of the game, and you get a lot out of it personally, and it will lead somewhere if you stick with it. There's because all your peers are going to drop off, but only the strongest will survive. And what the fuck am I talking about?
Well,
you know what I'm saying, right?
I mean, it's sort of that whole concept of, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life or something.
That's the truth. And I bust my balls with Fango. If you read it now, I write more than half the issue every single time, but it is not work. I love it. And it's like, oh my God, I get to communicate all this stuff. I know, maybe check back with me in like 5 years and maybe a different story. But it is not work. I mean, it is ball-busting work. Because it just never stops. You put one issue to bed, and by that time you're already 3 weeks into production on the next one. And you always have to keep it one step ahead of the game. But yeah, I love it so much, man. It is literally like a toy that I have that I can bend and shape and twist and do whatever I want, So it's a lot of fun, man.
And how did you feel about the magazine before you became editor-in-chief? Did you have any criticisms of
Absolutely. Yeah, I know. And everyone's funny about pussyfooting around that because Fangoria, in the fan culture, really, Fangoria was the only game in town for many years, and Tony had been there for a long time. So there was a certain formula to Fango. And then suddenly, internet pops up, other magazines pop up, and they're kind of doing their own thing, and the world is changing around the mag. And the mag is still kind of toeing the line with a very specific sensibility. And so a lot of people gave up on it because they wanted that thrill that they had initially when they were reading it. Now they were getting it from other places. So I understand that criticism, and I know why Tony did what he did too, because the recession hit a few years ago, and it was a long train to get there, and print media was really hurting. So Fango made some decisions. The management changed several times of what they were going to do. And unfortunately, one of those decisions was, even like a year ago, putting like New Moon on the cover. And again, this is the legendary one. I don't mind making fun of it because they did it because they were trying to sell as many mags as they could and use that cover as a gateway to get kids in to read about other stuff that they had in there. But it was a huge mistake because it isolated the core fan base that loved this mag. And some of them never came. It's very hard for me, no matter what I do, how many fucking bells and whistles I'm blowing now, to convince people to come back to the fold, right? And that cover with the dreadlock guy going, he didn't even have fangs. Those guys don't have fangs. The red eyes, like Bob Marley on a bender. Yeah, he's like, and it says, a darker twilight? It's like, oh, it's a black guy, and it says a darker twilight. No one picked up on that. It was just like such a, like you actually, when you saw it, you went, oh, no. So, yeah, my feelings about Fango was that I wrote for it, and I still loved it, and I believed in it. But I knew, and everybody knew, that it needed a fucking change, man. A facelift, not just a facelift, but a complete content rejigging. And I was always a fan. I mean, I love Tony's stuff in the 90s, what he was doing, but the 90s were a very different time in horror culture. But I love the early days with Bob Martin, the first like 36 issues, where, you know, Bob was a crazy guy, right? And so the magazine really reflected, again, a certain kind of gonzo, off-the-wall sensibility where you were reading this thing like an adventure, right? You didn't know which way you were going to turn. And there was just so much bizarre content in there. And I'm trying to find that middle ground now between that sensibility and something that's also contemporary. And, you know, and also, I mean, Fango for years, being the only game in town, had to be current. Everything had to be kind of exclusive and cutting edge and had to be informative about what's coming up, but that makes it instantly dated. So now with this wealth of history behind us, you don't have to worry about that. You can meander and take detours, and you don't have to be always on the cutting edge. If a movie opens up next month, it doesn't have to be in that next month issue. It could be in a couple. It's going to come to a different format, or TV, or video, or whatever. And a few months after that, you wait a little bit if you can get a better story. I mean, so I mean that's it. There's no real right now in the mag. There's no real lockdown formula. I've introduced a lot of new elements that are there as sort of a skeleton, but the stuff around it is kind of amorphous. It's doing all kinds of things, and I don't know if I'm going to lock it down or just let it ride for a little while, but I'm still kind of just basically I'm experimenting.
Which sort of leads me to another question is, as you're sort of molding this magazine in the image of you want it, you know, you spoke about things like the internet's effect, the recession's effect. What kind of changes do you foresee doing as you go forward? How are you going to use things like the internet? How are you going to change the magazine to sort of reinvigorate that core fan base while also bringing in new people? What do you sort of see as the future direction of where you're going to go with Fangoria?
Again, it's you know what, I'll tell you what the future direction is I'm going with my impulses. That's it. And I'm making a magazine that I personally would want to see and get excited about, you know, because that's the thing. I mean, I do, when I say I want to be 12 years old for the rest of my life, I don't mean I want to be like a hormonal fucking zit-faced loser, man. But I mean, I want to have that state of mind where my mind is open, and I'm doing it because I wake up in the morning, I'm excited, and I see movies, I still watch these films with a level of excitement and wonder and awe. I mean, nowadays with you know, it starts with DVD special features where they show you the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain. You know how all the tricks are done. There's no mystery there anymore. But I still have a genuine sense of awe when I watch a film. If it's a good film, I get moved. Sometimes moments of, no matter how gruesome they are, if they're incredibly well detailed and they're evocative, I'll get fucking teary-eyed because I'm just in awe that this thing exists. This piece of enduring art exists. And I want to make sure that sensibility is alive and well in the mag. And I hope that it's that. No matter what, you know, not everyone's going to love what you do. You're always going to divide. I put a video game on the cover this month, Splatterhouse, because we got a hand-done painting of this guy busting another guy's head and an eyeball popping out. And it was just like, what's the other big movie this month? Yeah. Predators? Come on, Predators. You know, Adrian Brody running around a jungle fighting that same monster. So I thought, you know what, this game's got buzz. It gives me an excuse to do a history of horror gaming. Fango has never explored that, ever. I'm roll the dice here, we'll see. And a lot of people are going, hey, this is awesome, best cover ever. Some people are like, give me a break, man. The 12-year-old gamer's mag, man. Yeah, like, well, you know, you can't please them all, yeah, but exactly. you can diversify the content enough to try to please them all. And as long as I think your heart's in it, my heart's in it, and I'm having fun, I think that it maybe you'll get that, you know, you'll get that.
But are you also like going to try and embrace things like the internet more?
Well, we got the website and everything, but you know, I could be wrong. I probably am. I'm a terrible businessman, tell you the truth. But I think there may be, to me, horror journalism has taken a major dip because of the internet. Because everybody can write. Now everybody has a forum and a voice, and they're not informed opinions more often than not. They're this cross-armed sense of entitlement, and it's maddening. It's fucking maddening, actually. And I think that now you're getting, just like CGI effects years ago, we're getting the backlash, is that you're starting getting this backlash of like, oh man, you know, I mean, yeah, I don't know if I want to do that. So I'm banking on, I mean, we have the website, and that's where you get all the current stuff and up to date and whatever else, and some, you know, experiment with content, what works, what doesn't. But my thinking is that people still, it's a collector, horror fans are collectors. You know, they want something tangible in their hands that they can touch and they can feel, that they can. And when I was a kid, I still go back to my back issues and read them. You want them. You want to see that. You want to display them. You want to have them there in those bags and protect them. You want to pass them on to your kids and stuff. And you can't do that with these things that are just floating around in cyberspace. They're just these things. You know, what are you going to do? Here's a kid, here's a fucking hard drive. I mean, it's not the same shit. So I think that there is a major, even though everyone's saying print is dying, it is. If you're like Men's Journal or Details or something. But when it comes to this genre stuff, I really believe that it does have a future. I'm banking on that it does. I'm really hoping it does. So am I going to embrace new technologies? Yeah, we will to some point. But to me, I want to keep the mag kind of pure in its own thing, you know?
Respect that.
And where do you see horror movies going in the future? Is there anything on the horizon that you're really interested in?
Am I interested in? I'll watch. I'm fairly open-minded, and I will, watch everything. But I mean, where it's going is, say remakes and this and that. You know, but it's true because. Because, you know, Hollywood needs, we're talking about Hollywood too, and again, where's horror going? It's like, well, it depends. Where are you talking about? France? You're talking about Italy, where horror films were some of the best horror films ever made came out of there, but it's been asleep for 20 years. There's a movie called Shadow coming out there that's threatening to kind of revamp Italian horror again. Man, maybe that's going to happen, and it's going to change things a little bit if that can popularize itself. But in Hollywood, I mean, it's, people are downloading the shit out of movies. You know, they're sneaking into movies. They're, as long as they keep doing that, the thinking is that we're going to keep investing all these big bucks, so we got to do it on reliable franchise properties and that people know to make our money back. I would like to see a return to the 70s style philosophy where people are taking risks and financing movies that are lower budget. They don't have to be. It's a horror film. You don't have to blow my brains with big actors and special effects. You don't need that, right? You just need a good director, a great story, a great visual palette, good music to really hook you in there. And I'd like to see studios start to, kind of revert back to that. But I think until a movie like that makes money, everyone's afraid, man. We're not out of the fucking woods. The film is in a major, major downturn financially, right? So I don't know where the future of horror is going. I just know that there will always be horror films as long as we keep dying. And I always say that, but when we die, we fuck, and we're going to watch horror movies because that's all that horror movies are about, is all those gushy little secret little mysteries of life that we'll never comprehend, but it's always fun to explore them in this kind of safe, pulpy environment. That's what horror movies are, no matter what they are, what walk of life, what country they come from, what subgenre, are they vampires or werewolves, who gives a shit? It's all the same, Beauty and the Beast, sex and violence, the beginning of your life and the end of your life. That's it. That's the future, but that's the past. It's always been the same. It'll always be the same.
Well, I think that's a pretty perfect place to end on, again, the magazine Fangoria. You can check it out. Apparently, Chris writes half the magazine pretty much at this point, which is pretty awesome. The website, fangoria.com.
It's as easy as that.
So check out the website, too, updated daily from what he says.
Hourly, man. Yeah, hourly. Yeah, it's a lot of content.
So as you're watching this right now, it's being updated. You might want to check that out after the podcast, of course. But again, thank you, Chris, for joining us.
Yeah, man, no problem. All right, cool.